Hey, how's it going, captains? Admiral Hattori here, and welcome aboard for another World of Warships video on my channel. In today's video, I want to share with you guys my thoughts on the upcoming alternative American battleship line. So I have the Tier 9 Minnesota, and I already put in more than 20 games in that ship. Right away, you might be asking, if I'm going to talk about this particular topic, why don't I have Minnesota gameplay in the background? There are two good reasons. The first reason is that this West Virginia gameplay was great. I promise you're going to enjoy the ending. The second reason is that these new American battleships, even though I do have very good games with the Minnesota that I could share with you guys, they are very boring to watch, unattractive, not entertaining. And the theme here is truly slowness. So whenever you watch something slow, it's just not fun to watch, but with the exception of this game being great. So yeah, I do have good games with the Minnesota. I just feel that you're better off watching this gameplay so I don't bore you throughout this video. And the West Virginia is still within the topic of what I'm going to talk about because it's part of these standard types. If you don't know what a standard type, don't worry, I will give you guys some context of standard type battleships. So I don't have the Kansas. I can't really give you guys an accurate opinion about the Kansas since I haven't played the ship, but I can at best speculate my opinion about the Kansas. On paper, from what I've seen, it's pretty bad, the characteristics of the ship. The Sigma, the armor scheme is just horrendous to me, on paper, from what I read, since I don't have the ship. From what I heard from others who own the ship, it's trash. And that's all I'm going to say about the Kansas. Now I'm going to set a reasonable expectations of this new line is that as you progress through the tiers, the ship should get better. So in this case, the Minnesota should be better than the Kansas. The Vermont should be better than the Minnesota. If I'm saying that expectations correctly or making that good assumption that that's going to be the way it is, then hopefully the Vermont is going to be a fun ship to play. So before I can really talk about my overall experience and what do I think about the ships, especially with the Minnesota, the general consensus from what I've seen is that this new line is seriously underwhelming, unattractive, and a lot of people think that it's just pointless. Now, I want to give you guys some historical context of this line because Wargaming certainly did not just pull out their asses these blueprints, these paper ships, and just put them in the game just for the sake of having more ships in the game. There are some historical context of these ships, even though they're paper ships. So in the 1910s, we got World War I. And one of the big things in World War I, aside from trench warfare, the introduction of tanks, and really using the machine guns, is naval warfare. Because having a navy was a big thing back in the day, since majority of the countries that were part of World War I were colonial power. If you have a crappy navy, you are unable to contest with any other major nation of conquering, colonizing, and owning some form of economic status in the world. For instance, the British understand that concept very well, considering that they sail across the world for India, China, the Americas. I don't know, there's a lot of areas, especially in Africa, that, if you heard about the Africa scramble, where the Germans, French, and the British, it's just imperial colonial power. That was the whole concept of having a navy. A strong navy is absolute, unless you choose to conquer through the means of land around you, which happens to be Europe, which also has most of the most powerful nations at that time. So navy was absolute, and the US had set forward a plan to build battleships ever since the introductions of the Dreadnought and the transformation from Dreadnought to actual full-blown battleships. So the United States set this long-term plan, this expensive navy plan. It's kind of like the American version of the H plan, like the Germans. The Germans had the H plan to build giant battleships in World War II that never came about. In the case of the US Navy, The plan was still going on until the London and Washington Treaty, and this is a big treaty. If you never heard of the treaty and you've been playing World of Warships long enough, then you gotta have to do some research about this treaty, because a lot of the mid-tier ships in this game were really designed around this treaty, because it sets the design limit, the total tonnage of the ship, and ultimately the size of the Navy. Primarily the Royal Navy, the Americans, and the Japanese. Those are three big nations that get mentioned in the treaty. We also got the French, and the Germans just weren't allowed to have a real navy, as I would best describe it, but they did have the Deutschland class cruisers, which were impressive because they kind of, in some ways, within the limits, but at the same time they kind of cheated because they removed a bunch of stuff in the ship before it got weighed, just to be within the limits. So when the treaty was enacted, when it was in effect, the United States weren't able to continue their standard type American battleship design. And the standard types took everything that they have observed during the Battle of Jutland, and one of the major concepts was the all-nothing armor scheme, where you only armor up the important portions of the ship just to save weight on the overall ship. So, you know, like if you look at the War Spy or the Queen Elizabeth, you see a bunch of armor, medium piece of armor, light piece of armor, heavily piece of armor all over ship. American ships, it's light basically all over the place except the Citadel, because that was the most important portion of the ship. And yeah, they are generally sold, and they're part of the series of standard type battleships. In the 1920s, there was supposed to be a South Dakota class battleship. Not the modern South Dakota that we see in the game with the Alabama, Massachusetts, South Dakota, and Indiana. It was a different alternative timeline. If the treaty was never enacted, we would have gotten these South Dakota class battleships, and there's really nothing else after South Dakota because we didn't go past that point. So when I was doing my research, there's just, you know, no paper about it. But what Working Man has done is basically got the South Dakota class, which is the Kansas, from what when you look at the images of the South Dakota on Wikipedia, it looks exactly like the Kansas. And then the Minnesota and Vermont was Wargaming's perspective of what a tier 9 or tier 10 standard type American battleship would be like, with a little sprinkle on the Vermont of the Tillman design, because if you look up the Tillman design, it was designed by some kind of crazy senator, and obviously it was just the most impractical, and it's basically, you know, this guy's a senator. He's no naval engineer. He just decided that, hey, let's put a bunch of big guns on the ship, make the ship ridiculously large, thick armor, make it unstoppable except itself. The thing that's gonna stop that ship is truly itself because of this design. So yeah, there is some historical context, and that was the whole purpose of the alternative line. It's an alternative timeline or alternative history that if this treaty was never enacted, then the US Navy would have continued to build more battleships of the standard type. And if we were to go to World War II in the 1930s and early 1940s, there would have been these ships in the US Navy modernized with that thick torpedo bulge. And there we have it. We have the standard type. Now, yes, I think the big elephant in the room here is that nobody likes the standard type from what I've seen. Majority of people don't like it. There's a very small population that people like the standard type. The whole purpose of design is all about firepower, broadside firepower. And that is the whole purpose to go down this line. If you like firepower, if you like catching people broadside, you play this line, because technically the Minnesota, in my opinion, is a early version of the Montana. You can really feel the Montana experience. Now I'm going to talk about the Minnesota specifically here. There has been plenty of videos by now that compare the Minnesota to the Iowa, and of course the big thing is the guns. The Minnesota guns, the shells are slower than the Iowa. The AP is less than the Iowa, the penetration is lower than the Iowa, and of course the reload is 40 seconds versus 30 seconds. The only advantage of the Minnesota over the Iowa in terms of firepower is that the Minnesota has one extra turret. I think the Minnesota has a 1.8 Sigma, if I recall correctly, versus the Iowa that has a 1.9 Sigma, if I'm correct on that. So the Iowa is more accurate. The only thing that the Minnesota has going for it is just the extra gun turret, which automatically makes the ship obsolete compared to the Iowa, because every other aspect, the Iowa has a better repair party. AA wise, technically the Minnesota has better AA because that's defensive fire, but the Iowa already has great AA. Speed, no comparison. Armor is kind of tough, okay? Armor wise, the Minnesota is actually pretty difficult to citadel at a distance because of its multi-layer armor scheme, due to the fact that it has that extra thickness on the torpedo bulge. But it is still it's still easily citadel because the citadel is at the waterline. I can't 100% verify that because I was not able to face enough Minnesotas that I can shoot their broadside and get a feel of how easy it is to citadel a Minnesota. But the Iowa is easily one of the easiest tier 9 battleship to citadel. So I feel that at the moment the Minnesota is actually more difficult to citadel than the Iowa. Although it is more difficult to citadel the Minnesota, if I'm making that prediction correctly, the Iowa still has great armor when it is angled. But you gotta also consider that how long the Iowa is and how easy a target the Iowa is. The Iowa also has better concealment. It's just better in almost every aspect, except that the Minnesota is more likely harder to citadel and has one extra gun. Let's talk about the firepower because that's the biggest topic, because like I said, the claim here is that they have more firepower than any other tier ship. The penetration, that was the first argument that people will make. The Iowa has better penetration, while the Minnesota has Colorado guns, tier 7 guns at tier 9. To me, the penetration is absolutely fine. I think that a lot of people, when people think that Iowa has better penetration, they automatically just default that the Minnesota has horrible penetration. That is not true. The Colorado at tier 7 with its current penetration value is actually above its tier. It's one of the best penetration value, if not the best penetration that you can get on 16-inch gun or 406mm guns from my fellow metrics people out there at tier 7. At tier 9, its penetration is considered average, if not above average, from my experience. I was able to citadel any cruiser at range when it showed broadside in my Minnesota. When a battleship shows broadside, I even citadel Iowas at a distance. If I'm able to citadel an Iowa at 15 kilometers, I don't think penetration is a problem. The only advantage of the Iowa's penetration is that maybe you can citadel a battleship at 19 to or 18 kilometers, whereas the Minnesota might fall short. So penetration-wise, not a big issue. Firepower, the damage per shell. Yes, the Iowa has a higher damage per shell, but at the same time, the Colorado shells are actually pretty good. It has good damage. It's 100 damage short compared to the Zumo, but still, you get 12 of these guns, and it's absolutely amazing when you get broadside shots on cruisers, because these guns are really extremely effective against broadside cruiser. Against battleship, they also definitely deadly against German battleship, because German battleship, they eat a lot of penetration. So in terms of damage, just the overall damage, it does live up to it. Versus the Iowa, it's really tough for me to say because I have a longer experience with the Iowa, but lately there have been games where I feel that the Minnesota does more damage than Iowa when you find games where people show broadside. Other than that, in terms of firepower, I feel like Minnesota has the edge, even though that Iowa has better guns. Now, people who aren't that great when it comes to aiming or leading will definitely go with the Iowa because of the 30-second reload. The 40-second reload is truly the Achilles of these new battleships, the 40-second reload. In my opinion, I personally feel that the reload should be 35 seconds. But 40 seconds I can live with. A lot of people suggest that it should be 30 seconds. Now, let me put this in perspective. At the moment, I average 130,000 to 135,000 damage per game on my record. 20 plus game, 130,000 damage. I personally prefer to play the Minnesota over the Lion and the Fever Deck Grocer. So I can't say, from my given my experience, I can't say that these ships are bad, because I actually prefer these ships over 2 existing tier 9 ships that's been in the game for a while. So yeah, that is my current stance with the Minnesota, and again, making the assumption that the Vermont is a far better version of the Minnesota, considering that it's equipped with 458mm guns, I think. Massive broadside, 12 of those. You can only imagine the damage that you can pull off with the Vermont. So damage wise isn't an issue, it's the versatility of the ship, slowness. And if you really value speed, which practically most people do at this tier, considering how large the maps are, it's a pain in the ass to play these ships. And yes, Colorado players hate it a lot, because once you pick a side of the map and you commit too far to the edge of the map, you practically miss out the whole entire other side. Like, there's just no chance that you're gonna reach the other side of the map. So if you pick a side where it's empty in the beginning game and you went too far, then chances are you're gonna be full HP once you get to the other side of the map, which really affects your overall win rate when you want to have some sort of impact in the game. And this is why people prefer the Iowa over the Minnesota. This is why you would go down the fast American battleship line, and this is probably the biggest reason why in the 1930s, when the United States Navy was re-evaluating their current design, they went down that path. Now the standard type, at the time when they were designing these standard types, remember, we still have the mindset of the 1910s and 1920s, the whole purpose is that they're going to build a bunch of these thick battleships, well armored, big guns, heavy broadside, and then have them in a battle wagon style, where they will go in, they basically sail in a line and they just, blast everyone out of the ocean. That was the whole concept of these ships. And in terms of warships, it's not really effective because people are doing their own thing. They're not really coordinated, unless we have games where 2 divisions of standard types actually get in the battle line and start firing broadside against other target, because again, I prefer to sail broadside in the standard types versus the fast American battleships, because the fast American battleships are too easily citadel. Just look at North Carolina's broadside. It's so easy to citadel the North Carolina, if not delete the North Carolina. So in short, I think that is not attractive to most people, but it is what it is. It's not going to change. Wargaming is not going to completely scrap. As I view it, it's extra ships to the current game at the moment. I think a lot of people were disappointed, especially those USN people. They wanted a stronger line compared to the primary line, if not as competitive as the primary line. The big argument was that they should have made the alternative line with existing ships and then turned them into secondary battery playstyle, like the German battleship. And I will say this, I don't think that's what's going to be possible. And the reason is simple. One, again, there is historical context for the alternative line. It's the alternative history where the US would have gone down this route. And 2, there already exists an American secondary battery line, which is Tier 8 Massachusetts at the premium price, Tier 9 the Georgia at a premium price, or if you want to grind out the coal and get it for free, and then Tier 10 the Ohio, which is Research Bureau points at a premium price. If you don't want to grind it out, you can just convert it to free XP, or you're truly dedicated to your regrind Tier 10 ships over and over and get the Ohio. So at the interest of Wargaming, there was just no way they're going to put out a line that is easier to get compared to the premium price or just getting the Ohio, which is an even grindier approach. And that's how I see it. I mean, if you're in Wargaming's position, why would you completely, stop the sale of premium ships that are specialized in something? It's a premium price when you can just keep it that way and then pick a different line, which is again logical because they do exist in some ways of a alternative history. And that's the way Wargaming viewed this current situation. That's why they went down this line. If it was a secondary battery line for this instead of this, it would have been probably like Tier 8 USS Washington. Tier 9 might have been another Iowa class. Tier 10 might have been the last Iowa class, but with actual accuracy and secondaries, or another paper ship to make up for that missing spawn at Tier 10. But from what I've seen, given that fact that there's premium ships with secondary build for the American line, it was not going to happen, and this is what we got. But I'm definitely looking forward to the upcoming Vermont once it's released. Overall, for the Minnesota, I do enjoy it, and for a person like me, I actually do enjoy the standard types, but at the moment, I think more people prefer definitely the fast American battleship just because of versatility. But it doesn't, discount that, these ships are useless, because remember, we're talking about randoms. If you're in a competitive match, rank match, then yeah, I think the Iowa is a better choice. The Missouri is the best choice. But in randoms, whatever statistics of your ship, it doesn't really matter because anything can happen, and I get a lot of games lately with the Minnesota that are enjoyable. But aside from that, I hope you guys enjoyed this video, and I'll see you guys next time on World of Warships.